Welcome to the Christianistas podcast. I am Thomas.
And I'm Spencer.
Quick disclaimer, this is for education and entertainment purposes. If you need help, please see a professional. We are not experts, doctors, nor dragons, nor do we give medical advice. Take our words with a gallon of salt.
Hey, Thomas, what's the question today?
Question is how to use and not be used by conversational techniques like rhetoric.
I feel like rhetoric is used a lot as a term, but I wonder sometimes if it's being used appropriately. And I feel like sometimes rhetoric is being used without being identified as rhetoric, where statements are just made and it's like, that's not a statement, that's just rhetoric. Yeah.
Yeah. Statement's made and somebody's like, that's just a fact. Another statement is made and somebody's like, that's just rhetoric.
So what is the difference? How do we identify rhetoric?
Well, I think that rhetoric is when other people are saying things you don't like, and facts are when other people are saying things that you do.
Oh, good. Okay, so
we're done.
Biases. You just lean into the bias.
Oh, man, that's like probably our initial emotional gut reaction, which, to be honest, that's what kind of we're going to be talking about today, is that rhetoric is using techniques of emotional or other sort of manipulation to get others to think, feel, or do something. And it gets a really bad reputation for probably good reason, because when I use the word rhetoric, I basically just mean any way of communicating something when you're trying to get them to think, feel, or do something. So with that definition that I'm using, all conversation is a practice in rhetoric. And that's okay. When you're talking to somebody, sometimes you are. I mean, I guess sometimes you're only trying to get them to understand something, but there's a lot of times where you want somebody to think, feel, or do something.
Well, I'm thinking of something as simple as my coworker, like, you'll never believe what happened to me this weekend. and then they tell a story that it's believable. I mean, it was over exaggerated by saying you'll never believe it, but it's just, oh my gosh, I had this experience and it was bad, and I want you to feel bad with me or for me, right? And not even in a manipulative, like I'm a terrible person. It's just like, yeah, I stubbed my toe and I had to go to the doctor because I turned out to break my toe. I was like, oh man, that stinks. And that empathy is what they wanted to share, and they wanted to share that experience, and they, you feel bad for them, and then you just move on because that's all they really wanted, Now, I guess you could use that rhetoric to, and I never did anything about it, can you take me to the doctor? That could be another level of the rhetoric used to get them to do something, but it can be very benign, I guess, is what I'm pointing out, in having someone emotionally feel with you.
Right. And I mean, I guess what people would say rhetoric gets bad is when you're trying to, get someone else to think, feel, believe, or do something. But because we have this idea that everyone's beliefs should be completely respected, treated as equal, and you should never have a goal to change anyone's mind about anything.
Yeah.
It's all relative. Everyone's right to believe whatever they want should definitely be respected, and that's my opinion. But there are a lot of hardships that happen to us and to the world because people believe things and do things that hurt them and hurt others. So I don't think it's immoral. Maybe this is just me trying to justify, like, maybe this podcast. I don't think it's immoral to talk to other people to try to convince them to do something that you think will hurt them less. I'm not talking about, you really should root for the Utes versus BYU, or you should like chocolate instead of vanilla. I'm talking about, people thinking that puffing 20 cigarettes a day isn't bad for them.
Yeah.
And isn't bad for the people they're living with or smoking next to.
Which is fascinating, because what little I watched of Mad Men, they like the beginning of Mad Men, the TV show, is this marketing company that is building rhetoric for the cigarette industry on how to counter a rhetoric. And it wasn't even like, it was just data. It was just research. It was like the research in the 60s that like finally came out like, dude, this straight up causes cancer. It's dangerous. It's harmful for everyone. And the industry was panicking, and they portrayed in this TV show where they're like, oh no, let me show you how to keep the rhetoric going so that we don't have to change our status quo. One was a very intentional manipulative rhetoric, and the other was just data. How do you get that information to a point where you're deciding which rhetoric to listen to?
Well, in my opinion, when you're talking about like what rhetoric to listen to, is it's all rhetoric all the way down. And if you give it the really negative definition, then yeah, that feels horrible. But then if you just realize that it's all just conversation, we evolved conversation to justify what we do and to convince other people to do things too. So it's just natural. One major part of this, though, is I see a lot of rhetoric online from lefties and righties, I'll call them, not handed. But I call this the threefold dilemma of changing opinions.
Okay.
And the threefolds of it are, and I don't know if dilemma is the right word, but maybe it's just, it's completely wrong. I should be able to use logic to convince people of things. Second is, people who can't be convinced by logic are willfully ignorant. And the third thing is, I came to my beliefs through logic, and others came to their beliefs through emotion.
One of those sounds wrong. Sounds false.
They're all wrong.
Oh.
Or
no, that's tracking, isn't it?
They're all false. There's this phrase that goes around of love, like, you can't logic someone out of a position they didn't logic themselves into. And we're going to get more into detail on this, but logic is not the primary factor for your beliefs either. We got to stop there for a second. Take everything that you believe about the world. There are multiple factors. I'm not saying it's just emotion or just upbringing, but the biggest factors for the baseline of what you believe are not from logic, are not from having good, reasonable reasons for believing those things. That's not the main foundation for the baseline of your beliefs.
So maybe a tangent to that, then why logic, why rhetoric? If logic isn't what we're convinced by or convincing by, then why use logic? And more importantly, usually I have a stance, and then I'm going to say, look at this data, look at this logic that justifies my stance. Is there value in that?
The biggest value, well, first thing, I would actually call logic a type of rhetoric. Who was it? Socrates? No. Next one. Aristotle. He talked about three main types of logic: logos, pathos, and was it ethos? Which is essentially what was that?
Ethos. Yes.
Oh, yes. I thought you said bathos, which is another thing, but that involves Marvel movies making jokes at stupid times. But logos, pathos, and ethos are making appeals to logic. So, like, here's an argument that sounds good. Pathos is an appeal to emotion. Like, I'm going to use emotion to convince you of something. Ethos isn't that an appeal to duty or an appeal to character or identity? I don't know. I'm a little more vague on the ethos one.
Yeah, and I always think of ethics, so morality and a guiding principles standpoint.
Oh, well, first thing I'll say real quick when it comes to logic is, and I've said this before, we have a lot of instincts for preserving our beliefs. So often we use logic real hard against other people and real weak against ourselves. And we should use it real hard against ourselves. And we'll talk more about the better ways to use rhetoric, but I've got a little phrase that I've come up with, which is logic for yourself, rhetoric for others. Meaning, when you're criticizing yourself, you should be harsh and use that hard-edged, sharp logic that you've been applying to everyone else's opinions. You should use that on yourself. And when you're talking to other people about their opinions, you need to work in the realm of stories and emotions and connection, which is rhetoric.
Hmm.
If you just use emotions and stories and connections on yourself, then your ulterior motives for just believing what you already believe and thinking that you're right is just going to stab you in the back. You have to be harsher with yourself.
Okay.
So before we move on to other ways that rhetoric can be used, well, I want to get back to that, but I want to talk about how is rhetoric used to manipulate us or people in general, and what are there are many types of rhetoric that can be used. You talked about some that are being used in like marketing. That's a good example of that. So we've got a whole list of them here. I'm going to start with the very first one, which is reverse psychology, which seems to have a limited window of when it works. Because it's one of those, it's like playing tic-tac-toe. Eventually you figure out the game.
Yeah.
It's like telling somebody, I want you to do X. And then they're like, well, now I don't want to do X. They have a backfire effect. You know what? Now I don't want to do X. I'm going to go do Y. And it's like, good. I wanted you to do Y the whole time.
Yes.
And then once they figure out the game, it falls apart. Go ahead.
I've been listening to a entertainment podcast, and they started using the phrase "bet you won't." Is strictly as and it was like the most succinct way of reverse psychology trying to convince someone to do the thing. They're like, I dare you not to do that.
Yeah,
because they totally want them to do it.
Well, it's kind of like an appeal to that's reminding me of, oh gosh, what was it called? Give a dog a good name is the phrase. You could do that with people too. You could say, hey, you're just awesome enough that I bet you'll do X.
Yeah.
Because you're awesome and awesome people do X. And that's actually kind of can be used evilly, but that can be a good example, a good tool to use.
Yeah.
But eventually, a lot of times people start figuring out, like, here's the biggest thing about rhetoric and when it fails is when you figure out you're being manipulated. Look at how people reacted to marketing in the early 1900s versus the early 2000s. Like, we are so, like, it's not that it doesn't affect us, it does, but we're so pessimistic now towards marketing. Or even, how did people react to things the government told them back then versus post-Nixon and since?
Yeah.
Like, we've figured out that these people who are talking to us don't have their own best interests in mind, not ours.
So I want to move on to the others, but I'm just thinking of two modern reverse psychology tricks that are marketing techniques that have kind of come out of the innovation of social media. And one is rage baiting. So, you say the absolutely absurd thing, which is totally a type of rhetoric, but it's to get you to go, what? Because that hook is important, right? You got to have your hook. You got to have your hook at the beginning of your podcast. Got to have your hook at the beginning of your video on TikTok.
And then you get those almighty views, comments, downvotes, engagement.
Yep. And part of the innovation of that comes from the algorithm's standard, which is the more comments and the more controversial comments that occur on the video make it more likely for it to be seen more. And so the system is set up to basically garner rage baiting, which is horribly unfortunate, but it's a reality.
Well, I mean, it's a feedback loop based on what's good for that platform, not what's good for society. Correct. So in the small situation of I promote content that incites rage, then we get more interaction and more views on our ads.
Yep.
But they don't care or think about the broader societal impact.
Yep. And then the other one is sympathy marketing. I don't know a better term for it. Rage baiting has kind of been solidified as something that everyone recognizes. but I've seen people on TikTok, they will say, I just ordered, I got a book, or I've got 500 units of X product and I can't move them. Please, can you buy them? And it's like, who flipping cares? That is called you are bad at managing your inventory. Like I
I
can't,
bought
I can't,
500 plates with horses on them, and I can sell them for a bajillion dollars.
yes.
Wait, no, I can't sell them. Please buy them, please. I
Well,
need the
please
money.
buy
My
them.
children.
But people say that this works, and I've seen this quite often where people are using sympathy to be like, I can't move this inventory, please can you help me? I'm not going to be able to make rent this. And it's just like, what? Why are we buying into this sympathy marketing that but they are able to move product because of what reason I don't understand, but that seems to be also effective in this modern
Hellscape? No,
this
just kidding.
the hellscape. Yeah, that's what it feels. Okay, moving on.
Okay.
Reverse psychology. So
Yeah, so we talked about reverse psychology. I want to talk about, in fact, a lot of these serve this role, but thought terminating cliches. That is a technique is where you use a phrase which gives the illusion of a conclusion, but merely tricks the brain into thinking the question is resolved.
yeah,
You had a couple of these, Spencer.
yeah. I follow this guy on TikTok. He goes by J Rupp. I think is his last name, but he teaches rhetoric in high school, and he does a TikTok channel where he talks about what he talks about in high school. And this one, like, I didn't realize I didn't like this phrase, but you got to remember your why. And he's sitting there as a teacher. He's like, I don't have enough resources. I don't have enough money. I don't have enough time. I don't have enough X, Y, and Z to be able to teach my kids the way that they need to be taught. And I'm worried about my healthcare issues right now because I have really bad healthcare. And instead of saying, oh yeah, no, those are valid problems, we should help fix those, instead people say, well, you just need to remember your why. You just need to remember your purpose as a being a teacher. And if you forget your why, then that's a you problem. And it's like, my inability to pay for a doctor is not a you problem. That's a, inability to pay for a doctor problem. But it's a very thought terminating thing. And then another one that reminds me similar to that is burnout is a passion problem. And it's like, well, you just don't have enough passion. You don't understand your why, which is why you're burning out. If you understood your why, then you wouldn't burn out. And it's like, no, there's a lot of reasons why
Speaking
burnout
of rage
occurs.
baiting, that is like that hit what you just said right there about like burnout is a passion problem.
Uh-huh.
That oof. Yeah, burnout, like the flames are ignited, but they're not the flames of passion, they're the flames of rage.
Yeah. And we have to recognize them for what they are, which is thought terminating cliche. They're to, I don't want to validate your experience. I don't want to acknowledge your troubles. I'm sorry that you stubbed your toe, but if I could thought terminate cliche my coworker and say this didn't happen. She didn't stub her toe. Um, but if she ever did, I could say, well, you just need to look out for where you're going. And if you were more mindful, and if you were more careful, and if you were more X, Y, and Z, then you never would have caused the problem that you caused. And so
Oh,
it's your
that
fault.
just leans into the whole like you have control of everything. And I
Mhm.
don't believe that people have control of nothing, but some of these rhetorical tools, like, remember your why, because if something's not working out, it's your fault. Because if that were true, then that implies that it's all in your control. It working out, if it can be your fault, or if it is your fault that it's not working out, then it can be not your fault when it, like, oh, then it's a me problem. I can fix it.
I've got the best thought terminating cliche, and it's a classic.
Give it to me.
Pull yourself up by your bootstraps.
As
It's
somebody who studied a bunch of physics, I'm just like, that doesn't work. All you do is tighten your shoes.
well, and I don't know if this is true, but I have heard that it originated from a science book trying to teach the idea of pulling yourself up by your bootstraps is physically impossible.
Oh,
It
now I want
defies
to
the laws of
research that
physics.
because if that's where it came from, I'm going to laugh my eyeballs out.
Yeah, and so I've heard that that's the case. I everyone go research that and prove me wrong or prove me right, but I have heard that it was intentionally designed to show the silliness of the phrase, and the phrase was invented to to present a silly scenario that's impossible, and yet it has become a rhetorical tool for a lot of people to justify either your actions or other actions. That I just pulled myself up by my bootstraps and I solved it myself. No, you
There's
didn't.
a
You
there's a bunch of different phrases that have been commandeered like that. Like, oh shoot, what was it? A curiosity killed the cat.
hmm,
The whole thing is, but curiosity killed the cat, but satisfaction brought it back. I don't know what that means, but what I do know what it means is the customer is always right.
except when
Here's
they're
the whole
wrong.
quote. Here's the whole quote. The customer is always right in matters of taste.
Ah, yes.
It just completely nukes the whole thing. Like people are like, customer's always right, customer's always right. And he's like, and whoever originally said that is like, no, you dummies.
There's a classic business article that I read years and years ago that it was the customer is always wrong and we need to acknowledge that. And and it's just this rant
Was it on
about
LinkedIn? Just
on
kidding.
LinkedIn. Oh yes, no. Yeah, it's on my LinkedIn
I
channel.
mean, did they have the word leaderly in it like 20 times?
It's got synergy at least a couple of times. No, but it's a very sincere just frustration of us bowing down to this one piece of rhetoric is actually harming ourselves, and
And the
it harms
customers.
our ability to, yeah, and ultimately our customers, but it harms our ability to be able to provide for our customers the way that we really would want them to be able to.
All right, so I'm going to try to cruise us through the next few a little bit faster because it could be very easy for us to spend a lot of time in these.
Yes.
And we have done that a little bit with the last couple, but I want to give a general idea of what rhetoric could be.
Okay.
So I'm gonna cruise through. I might actually cruise through a whole bunch of these because looking at the time, I want to make sure that we have enough time to talk about the other half of this. There's a bunch that have to do with language. So an example is exaggerated language, which is a magnifying something to make the differences appear more intense.
Okay.
A simplified language, making something look simpler to make it easier to understand.
I have to give one example of this. This is not recommended by anyone, but the joke is you come home and you tell your spouse and you say, "Hey, I just bought this new tool and it costs $500." And they panic and they say, "$500? We don't have $500. I can't believe you did that. Why didn't you tell me?" It's like, "$500? I'm sorry. I didn't say $500. It was $200." And they go, "Oh, okay, that's better." And supposedly by over exaggerating and then bringing it back to reality, you can quote get away with making a decision or making a
That's
choice
anchoring.
inappropriately.
You gave them a different starting number to anchor at, and then you adjusted it. They
Yeah,
might have still flipped out if you had said 200 initially.
right. And that's the joke. And I've been
Oh.
aware of that. I think my entire marriage, and I have tried ever so hard never to use that one. And I do not see a good reason to use that, unfortunately.
Oh, that's so manipulative. Okay,
Yeah,
awesome.
keep going.
So some more that have to do with language is rhyme is reason effect. You give more weight to statements that rhyme. The family that plays together stays together. Happy wife, happy life.
Oh, that one.
And there's this like pleasant feeling in our heads when words rhyme or use some other type of poetry.
Mhm.
And we're like, ooh, and you give it a little more attention than it probably deserves. Happy wife, happy life. I mean, yeah, you want to make your wife happy, but if you've got a happy wife and a miserable you, does that equal a happy life? Is the wife being happy the only thing that matters? What if you got a
I
wife that can't be happy?
I was in a conversation, I was in a meeting where we were talking about family, development and figure out how to improve family relationships and mainly marriage relationships. And someone started quoting that, and I was like, "I see what you're trying to get at. Can we unpack that a little bit and talk about that? There should be more to that because I feel like that it's not as simple as it's oversimplifying that." And the woman just kept repeating the phrase, and she was thought terminating with a rhyme as reason, by constantly just saying the phrase. And I was just like, we're not going to be able to discuss this, are we? You're oversimplifying the problem, and you're not going to allow us to discuss this, are you?
Because heaven forbid that situation be more complicated. It sucks that even more that it was a woman's perspective, because it's like, if you make me happy, everything will be fine.
Yeah.
Woof.
It wasn't my wife, fortunately.
Transposing terms, which is where you repeat words in successive clauses to give the illusion of deepness. Like, if you put life, what is it? If you want love in your life, you have to put life in your love.
If you plan to fail, then you fail to plan, or vice versa.
Yeah, I think it's the other way around.
Yeah, whichever way. It works both ways, it feels like.
Right. But also, some of them, again, like the customer's always right, people used to say, it is what it is. And that always drove me crazy, and it pissed me off. I'm like, well, it isn't what it isn't, too, but you don't see people going around saying it isn't what it isn't.
Agree to disagree, I think.
Agree to disagree. But I learned something. It is what it is, or at least if it's used well, doesn't just mean it is what it is. They're saying, or they could be saying, reality as it is based on just reality, not what you want it to be. It is what it is. It isn't what you want it to be. It already is. What you want isn't a factor for how the universe sits. But like, oh, man, I wish the United States worked like X. Well, it is what it is.
Yeah.
It can be used as like, reality just is. It's not going to change based on your desires. You're going to have to do something else. So that's a transposing terms.
It's funny how some of these are interweaving with each other, because it is what it is becomes a thought terminating statement.
Right? Yeah. And there are a couple more language based ones. There's Latin root bias and other etymological techniques. Most people don't study language, don't notice these, but words that have a Latin or Greek or French root are usually seen as more intelligent or refined than words with like an Old English root. The best example is a cordial reception versus a hearty welcome. Their roots mean the same thing. They both have to do with hearts, and they have to do with like somebody coming in a good way.
Yeah.
And one of them sounds high class and intelligent, and the other one doesn't. So people will, when they're trying to look more intelligent, will use more Latin root words, even if there is a standard Old English root word that has the same meaning. Sometimes you've got some unique words that are only the Latin root words, and that's fine. But if you've got the choice between a Latin root word and a common word, and they mean the exact same thing, just one feels more refined, then just use the frickin' normal word. Mm-hmm. Unless you're talking to an audience that needs to hear the Latin root so they can feel that unless you're manipulating them. Like, so I guess part of me was just like treating it immediately like it was bad, but there are cases to use it and not to use it.
You've used the word manipulating multiple times, and I want to make sure we're defining manipulation, because I feel like manipulation is a neutral term in the context that we're trying to use it.
Yes, and it's usually not treated as a neutral term.
Correct. It's usually a negative connotation, but I feel like we're trying to use it as a neutral connotation of, this is just manipulation. It could be manipulation for good, but it could be for evil, or it could be for my purposes and not yours. But manipulation is just a nature of rhetoric, isn't it?
Manipulation is kind of the nature of conversation.
Okay.
I mean, even if it is only for the purpose of getting somebody to understand you, all language is about, it's not just about trying to get someone else to do something. It's because maybe all that you're trying to do is get them to understand you.
Yeah.
That's a form of manipulating, meaning doing an action to get something to happen.
Yeah.
I like that you brought that up about manipulation. There's 2.5 more that I want to talk about.
Okay.
First one is a whole category. It's called appeals to emotion. Appeals to wonder, to anger, to pity, to sadness, to patheticness, to rage, to spite. There are techniques that you use to bring an emotion to the conversation or to the other person. And because when somebody starts feeling that emotion, their thinking is going to start moving a certain direction.
Mm-hmm.
And we kind of talked about that a little bit with social media. There a lot of stuff. Rage bait, that's an appeal to emotion. You are using emotion as a manipulative tool to get people to think or do something. The other one is definition dancing, is what I call it. And that's actually a whole category of them. That's where you're playing with the definitions of words, where maybe halfway through the sentence you flip it around, but you act like you didn't. Oh, well, no, I didn't mean that. I meant Y. I didn't mean Z. I meant Q. Yeah, most of the time those ones are pretty dishonest. I don't know how often, unless you're telling a joke. In fact, a lot of puns and jokes are actually a form of definition dancing. But when you're trying to get somebody to like Trojan horse accept one idea, but somehow are trying to squeeze in a different or another idea in with it because you're playing with the meanings of words, that's pretty much mostly a negative rhetorical technique.
Yeah, that makes sense. You've got one final one here. And
I kind of got two final ones because most of these have been about the words that you're using. And one that I did not touch enough on, but there are ways of talking that can be rhetorical techniques as well. One I'll say real quickly is like barrage arguments. That usually has to do with saying a bunch of things really quickly. So the rate and the energy and the passion with you say the words are being used as a technique even more than what words you choose. Hypnotic pattern speaking, which is a way of speaking to encourage people to think your words are more profound. Slow down your speech about 75% normal talking speed. You emphasize a few key words. Take long pauses. You drop the pitch. You drop the volume. And then everyone suddenly thinks you're saying something real profound.
Wow, that was so deep. So deep. Do it again. Just kidding. Don't do it again.
Do it again, but do it closer to the microphone and snap your fingers and crinkle some paper.
Yes. ASMR. Oh, where does ASMR fit in the rhetoric? Because it's somewhere in there. I don't know where yet. One person that I think is really cool that I've seen a lot of videos, Vin Gang. He's just this guy that he kind of it's not necessarily hypnotic pattern speaking, but he talks about positive patterns in your speaking and the way you emphasize. And the guy is just so animated and so loving that when and how often do you talk about loving? But that's a apt adjective for the way he talks, and he teaches you how to talk in a way that's effective. And in some ways it's public speaking, but a lot of the times he talks about just like one-on-one, make sure you're doing this, make sure your intonation is X. And it feels like it follows in that realm of hypnotic pattern. That one way is slow your speech down, emphasize those words, repeat a pattern multiple times, repeat the pattern multiple times, but there's also excitedness, and there's compassion in there's different ways. And he's done either studies, or at least he's just really good at it in a lot of ways. And I wanted to shout out him that he's a great resource for using that rhetoric in an effective manner again.
And one reason I'm actually fine with us having spent so long talking about these different techniques is that most of these can be used in a good way.
Uh-huh.
I would like people to use the word rhetoric in a more neutral way so that I don't have to keep finding new words to use for people. Darn language. People keep corrupting it over time, and then we have to keep finding new terms for things. Oi, 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 oi.
Yeah.
I mean, Richard Dawkins, I was going to say he's rolling in his grave, but he's not in his grave yet. But Richard Dawkins is rolling in his bed at how we've used the word meme. He meant a lot more than what we're using, what most average kids are using it for nowadays.
It's weird to have an 8-year-old tell you it's just a meme, Dad. I was like, I don't think you understand how that works, but I think you're right at the same time because I don't
Yeah,
know what that
well,
means
I
either.
wonder if maybe they are coming around to using it. Like it's an idea that spreads like a virus,
Yeah,
right? That's the super simplified version of what Dawkins said a meme was.
yeah,
But for the last part of this, I want to focus more on how do we use rhetoric for good.
sure.
And the first part to that is I want to talk about what I'll call the answers to the threefold dilemma of changing opinions.
Okay.
So I'm going to repeat those, the original ones. They were I should be able to use logic to convince people of things. People who can't be convinced by logic are willfully ignorant. And I came to my beliefs through logic, and others came to their beliefs through emotion. All those are false. Counter version. I need to use emotion, stories, and relationship building to help people change their own minds. Just challenge two assumptions in there, like people change their own minds. People can think differently than me for good reasons. And last, I and others came to most of our beliefs through how we were raised, our emotions, and our personal experiences. Not necessarily logic. It is, especially for people who try to study it, the function of logic and criticizing their own thoughts, it becomes an important factor. But even after years of analyzing your own beliefs with logic, it's only it, it it's really hard to say if you could ever figure out when you would be justified in saying most of my beliefs now come from logic.
Yeah.
Because we all have an instinct to say that already. That's why I bring the point of logic for yourself, rhetoric for others. It may be rhetoric for you too. So this is what I wrote about a long time ago. Use tools of logic and argument to check your own beliefs. Use emotional tactics and rhetorical techniques to convince others. Rare are the people that can be convinced via logic alone, for they're the ones who have learned to attach their emotional convictions to the output of logic. Now that I'm making a little bit of probably Latin root there, but what I'm trying to say is how we justify and work with our beliefs has a lot to do with what we put emotional investment into. Like, I'm going to be emotionally invested if somebody challenges this part of my belief or my identity. And if you start to learn to shift that away from the contents of your beliefs to your methods of beliefs, that helps a lot. Being able to say, in order, or like being less like, well, I think the earth is round, and being more emotionally attached to this process of figuring out if the earth is round or flat is what I've really got the confidence in. It's this scientific process, because if they were attached to thinking the earth was round, then when somebody says, actually, it's not really a sphere, it's a lumpy ovaloid, then they won't get defensive about it being a sphere. They'll be like, go through the process, be like, oh, yeah, lumpy ovaloid. But if what you're protecting is the belief versus, if what you're attached to is the belief versus the methods for creating better beliefs, then you put you're putting your conclusions first and pretending you're putting logic first.
What I'm hearing is figuring out when to use simple language versus when to use complex.
That is one part of learning how to use language to affect other people. Maybe affect is a better word than manipulate.
Yeah. One of the things, especially when it's use emotion, stories, relationship to help people change their own minds. Remember that others came to most of their beliefs through how they were raised, through their emotions and personal experiences.
Mm-hmm.
The phrase, the term that comes to mind, and I feel like it's being attacked because it's so powerful, is empathy. And I don't know if you realize, like, there's a lot of people that are attacking empathy and actually vilifying it and calling it, in religious circles, calling it that it's a sin to utilize empathy or to leverage empathy in an argument. And ultimately it's in an argument is where they're finding fault with it, because
Empathy
saying
is
we
what
should,
you use. Empathy is what you use on people in your group, and violence is what you use on people outside of your group. So for me, when I see all these people just talking about, I can't understand these other people, they must have made this choice for who they voted for because they're evil, because they're selfish.
Mhm.
What they're doing is they're following the tendencies of of othering, of saying your group is threatening my group, and it's because your group is bad and wrong. Because the instinct of saying your group is bad and wrong empowers you to destroy that group to protect your own.
Yeah. And I think the rhetoric that is at fault at the very beginning is the your group versus my group. Where if it's our group or our people, or we find a unity or we find a relationship with those others, even though they look and act so different than us, we're able to still have empathy for them. We're still able to use our emotion and connections with emotion, stories, and relationship, as you put it.
And it's funny because we're all in this big social space, and we've got two types of instincts at play. Instincts for preserving and protecting our group, and instincts for fighting and defending against the outer group. But we're not small groups of, hunter gatherers or villages or even, small cities and stuff that are spread by time and space. Like, everybody's getting online all together. And so we're trying to treat people like they are both in and out of our group. For example, I've seen people on both the left and the right, again, reiterating false dichotomy, but anyway, it's the dichotomy they're all living in, saying those people on the right are bad, evil, and wrong. People on the right saying those people on the left are bad, evil, and wrong. And I'm just like, guys, we're all in one country together. They will say the other side is bad, evil, and wrong. Now they need to agree with what I'm saying so that we can work as a team. It's like,
Yeah.
are we on a team? Are we in a group? Are we in a tribe? Are they in your in group or are they not? Because you can't have it both ways. If you treat them like they're part of the out group and then expect them, sorry, this is me getting passionate because you know what? This is part of the reason for this podcast is
Yeah.
I see all of these people treating each other like crap and expecting to get somewhere. I see people getting online and saying those who voted for, I'm just going to say it because you know what? If anybody feels personally offended by this, I'm targeting both sides on this. Somebody who voted for Donald Trump shows that they are an immoral person and they want others to suffer. You don't know enough human psychology to know how frickin' wrong you are. The majority of people want what's good for them and for their families. And you know what? Yeah, people sometimes want what's bad for what they consider the out group. And so do you. So stop, oh gosh. I just see these people and it's like people who voted for Donald Trump are voting for evil on purpose. And I'm just like, there was a conversation between, probably literary, but between Socrates and I forgot who the other guy was. But the other Socrates was like, "Do you think that people desire that which is bad?" And the other guy's like, "Oh yeah, some people desire bad things." And through the course of the conversation, which of course shows Socrates as a genius, they kind of come to the conclusion together that people don't knowingly desire things that are bad for them. If people desire something that's bad, it's probably because they don't know that it's going to be bad for them. And then I have to add on top of that, for people listening to this being like, oh, I should probably judge those people less harshly. Maybe you're right. Maybe the people on your political side of the aisle are less bad, but there are traits and aspects, can't make it black and white. There are traits and aspects that you are doing the same thing. There's something that you're espousing or you're voting for that, according to that other person's point of view, they think that you are doing because you are wrong, because you are ignorant, or because you are evil.
And I think the bridge that you're trying to emphasize is using emotion stories and relationship to help people change their own minds is fundamentally what we're trying to speak to. We are able to use our ability to have a relationship with those people because I have people like that in my family. And sometimes, and in some ways, it's we have to move past the rhetoric because they'll sit there and they will repeat the same phrase over and over. And they're happy wife, happy lifing me. And where if it just sits down and it's like, what are you concerned about? What are you worried about? And asking more questions and being more curious leads, and it takes a lot of emotional effort
Regulation?
and regulation to be able to do that, because you're just like, I want to punch you so bad right now because you're just throwing rhetoric at me, where maybe sometimes the big R rhetoric needs to take a pause, and the little R rhetoric of, tell me, what are you afraid of? What are you so afraid of that is causing you to act and think the way that you're thinking?
Well, first off, asking that question directly might just backfire.
Oh, totally.
But second off,
that's what we want to get to, isn't it?
What you want to get to is understanding them. Because with that assumption, you're starting with the assumption that it's fear that's motivating them.
Right.
Or that it's mostly fear that's motivating them. There could be other things that are serving as really strong motivators.
Sure.
There probably are. So, like, I like the direction you're going, but we got to take even another step back. There's this book called How to Have Effective Conversations.
Okay.
And if you read the back of it, essentially it seems like how to change other people's minds. And you know what? That's a significant part of the book. At least a significant part of the ending goal of the book. The first, the beginning of every chapter and the first 2/3 of the book are all about, you're not right about everything and you need to learn to understand other people. It's like, yeah, technically you need to learn to understand other people in order to change their minds. It comes from some notes where we were talking about doing things the right way versus the slow way or the imagined way. But yeah, the point that I want to make with this part is, if you want to be good at changing people's minds, you must first seek to change your own mind all the time. You must next seek to understand other people. Oh, and by the way, you basically got to drop the goal of changing other people's minds to achieve goals 1 and 2. If you have the goal of changing people's minds in your head all the time, then when you're trying to change your own mind and when you're just trying to understand other people, that goal of changing their mind is going to undermine you. It's a paradox. You have to focus on changing yourself and understanding others before you can ever focus on changing others. And I feel like that's an important note about rhetoric in general, is that there's a ton of these techniques out there. But when it comes to getting people to think either better or similarly or for yourself, it's relationship building, it's emotions, it's stories. It's not like just a math problem that you can, or like, I have to get the right shape of tool and then I can twist it and turn this person to a different direction. Mm-hmm. We are social creatures, and focusing on improving our relationships with others will improve all the other things.
There was a thought terminating quote that I saw, and I don't even need to mention who the person was because I've seen it far
Tony
too
Robbins.
Often. It was probably Tony Robbins. I think he'd be smart enough not to do it, but the phrase of the situation has gotten so bad with X that if you disagree with me on this, we are done. And it's not even thought termination, it's relationship term. And you're talking so importantly about we're relationship people.
You're
And
telling people you're kicking them out of your in-group.
yeah.
Yeah, I
And
no longer consider you part of my group.
and it's such a hard thing to see when someone does it, especially when it's someone close. One, because either I got kicked out or I watched you kick someone out, that I'm like, we got to figure out how to do better than this. And I don't blame that person. Having empathy and, thinking emotionally from their standpoint, that I get it. I get why they're so frustrated. And in some ways, boundary making is a completely different topic for a completely different day, but it's part of
Yeah.
it's part of rhetoric of just that we're not going to get anywhere. That agree to disagree phrase is really a boundary making stance. It is not a rhetorical tool. It's just,
No,
hey,
because you're not trying to change. You're not with that statement. You're not trying to change or like. Well, I don't know. I was gonna say with that statement, you're not trying to change them or their opinion, but it seems like you're just trying to say, let's maintain our relationship, but let's not talk about this.
yeah. And I think that's really what it is. And if you violate that boundary, I'm going to have to take different measures, which is I'm probably going to leave or distance myself from you. Right.
Yeah.
And I think that has to happen at some point where it's like, hey, I see situations so badly that I will terminate this relationship. And it's really hard. And maybe I mourn not so much that you're wrong for doing that or you've kicked someone out, but it's, man, I mourn for that loss of that relationship that no longer can happen.
Sorry, did you have one more bit with
No,
that?
go for it.
The hubris of saying, I understand the situation and I understand people and I understand you well enough to lay judgment that if you still think Y or if you did Y, then you are damned. You are dead to me.
Yeah.
Like,
That's hard.
first off, it's incredibly egotistical too. Like, you put yourself on a pedestal of you being absolutely right. And no, I'm not saying that genocide, murder, arresting people without due process, I'm not saying those are okay, because they're not. First off, saying if you believe X, I'm done with you. There's an insane pride about your position. There's an insane pride about your knowledge of the other person and of the morality of the universe. And also, you just cut yourself off from any other options with that person.
Yeah.
So even if you're right, even if some of these people, even if their minds could never be changed, shouldn't you at least gamble on the chance that you might be wrong instead of making sure that there's no chance to change them? Like, you just did something that made sure that there was no chance to reach them.
I think it's very challenging. And speaking of the innovation of our relationships in context of social media and these our technology platforms that allow us to connect with people. I'm part of a local community group where we just share information about what's happening in our city, and someone shared a political stance of an event, a political thing that's happening locally. And there was a whole bunch of people that used the laugh emoji because they disagreed with it, and they used the laugh emoji, and they got kicked out of the group. And they're just like, if you use laugh emojis when we, you can just move on. You don't have to comment on this. And it's like, okay, someone's getting a little emotional here, but also it's that easy to terminate a relationship. It's that easy to create an in group and an out group where I'm stuck with my neighbors. I haven't talked to my neighbors except for when I got their mail and I handed it to them a year ago. But outside of that, like, I'm both stuck with my neighbor, but I have zero relationship with my neighbors because I can satisfy my relationship needs through modern technology. We have to be thinking very more mindful and more intentful on what our relationships look like to be able to build bridges and to be able to ultimately change my hearts and minds, I guess, if we're really intentful on needing to do that. I think
Yeah.
there's spaces for my in group to be able to talk, and apparently it's not my local city's Facebook community group, because that's not a safe space. But I can find a safe space to be able to talk to that. But if I'm only resigned to that space to be able to talk, and then everyone else is kicked out, that's where that I don't know what to do. I wish I could say absolutely that's where you need to stop acting so prideful, or knock off your hubris and do it. But I'm trying to use what you said we need to do, which is use our emotions, stories, and relationships to help build people to change their own minds. And we need to recognize that others came to their beliefs through how they were raised, emotions, and personal experience.
Right.
And for me to connect with that, terminating the relationship is the hardest part of that aspect, isn't it? I can't do that unless I maintain some sort of relationship, some sort of experience that I can share with them.
So I think I'll add this to wrap us up.
Yeah.
So we're a little longer today, but I think that's okay. Something I probably repeat a lot. Do you want to be right, or do you want to be effective?
That's a great conclusion to rhetoric.
Do you want to be right, or do you want to be effective? And you got to ask yourself, are you saying, if you still have X opinion or stand for X political party, you are dead to me, we could never speak again? Is that you moving towards the goal of being and feeling right? Or is that going to effectively change things? Negative things like that can have an effect. But as maybe a last thought about shunning, research shows that shunning only really works when it's a majority doing it to a minority. If it's a bunch of minorities doing it to each other, or smaller groups doing it to each other, it does not have an effect. So all you people who think that all your shunning and outcasting and ostracizing is going to work, it's like, well, it only works if you're the majority doing it to a minority. Last thing that I will say, question-wise, is look at how you feel when people are talking to you. Look at how others feel when you're talking to them, and see what actually gets the goals. Like, see what changes their mind, see what starts changing your mind, and work with what's effective and make better relationships. So I'm not even going to end with a question. Step 1, you're wrong about everything, and that's okay. Step 2, understand other people. All these other goals can't change nothing unless you understand it first.
Awesome.